My name's Josh, and I do metal fabrication, CNC plasma cutting, and metal forming, and general metal fab. I got a bunch of tools in here, and we can kind of hang out and check out what we got.
Do you have anything to say about Cam?
Not that I want to say on camera, no. Cam's a really good dude. I don't know, I think we should start with a plasma cutter. Probably, I mean, that's the coolest thing in here, I think. Yeah, this is my CNC plasma cutter. It does my job for me, essentially. It's my employee that doesn't sleep or eat or take a break. And for what I do, it's 100% critical. Like, without it, I would be out of a job. Essentially, so there's two components to the plasma cutter. There's the motors and the controller for it. And then there's the plasma power source that does the actual cutting. So my computer and my CAD drawings and my CAM programming sets up the motors, and it tells the motors what to do and where to move. And then the plasma cutter itself is what does the actual cutting of the steel or aluminum. So yeah, then those two work together with another program, that the main controller that runs the whole system, and that's basically what makes this machine work. So the machine is a Fastcut, fully made in Kamloops, 100% Canadian made. Everything is built, designed, tested there. Nothing's outsourced from their shop. I mean, honestly, like, I bought this machine used. I bought it 2 years old from another guy. I'd heard about Fastcut before, and that was kind of who I was after when I wanted to buy a machine. It just so happened that this one came up for sale for a really good price. I purchased it. But honestly, if I was gonna buy new, there'd be no other machine I'd buy anyways. Just being 100% Canadian made, 100% local. Like, if I needed parts, I can go there within 2 hours and I can go get parts, or they can ship them out to me. I'm not dealing with somebody in the States, some call center or whatever, right? That takes weeks to get an answer, much less a part if something breaks. Fastcut's definitely the way to go as far as that.
What's the 360 controller for?
It's for gaming while we're cutting parts. No. It actually controls the unit. It actually controls the CNC. So rather than right now, if I had to run the machine, I'd have to run it like this with my X or my up and down, side to side to run it like that. But it's hard to find like your zeros as to where you want to start. So if I wanted to put a part somewhere, instead of standing over there and doing that, I can control the whole machine with the Xbox controller. I'm a PlayStation guy though, so it's kind of tough. But yeah, fire the plasma. It just helps me do my job more efficiently. Most plasma tables have some kind of a controller, whether it's like a little pendant or something that's proprietary to them. For this machine, this just so happened to be the easiest thing to do, was to just hook up a Xbox controller to the CNC and run that. Yeah, I do have some GoPro mounts on it that just for Instagram filming or whatever else that I'm not very that good at. But I try. So right beside it is the plasma cutter itself. This is the unit that is what does the actual cutting. It's a Hypertherm 85. I can cut up to 1.25" plate on my max setting at 85 amps. It runs pretty slow, but it actually does a pretty clean cut. Basically an on-off switch and a dial between 0 and 85 amps. I'll move this guy out of the way. I do have a set of oxyacetylene tanks. I do have an oxyacetylene torch for the plasma table if I want to cut really thick plate, but I don't use it very often. I maybe only use it twice to cut like 2-inch thick plate. But I don't really like doing that. There's so much heat involved in that, and it might warp the table being so hot, and it's just not something I like to deal with. 2-inch plate's pretty thick. It gets heavy. So yeah, that's for excessive thickness cutting, but I can cut up to 1 inch with what I have, and that's pretty sufficient. I'm gonna load this sheet of the parts I want to cut. And so it's just generating the path now, and then I can basically use my Xbox controller. I'm gonna move the head to that pierce point, and then I'm gonna zero it. Because I knew where the other pieces are, I can cut beside them, and now it's gonna do its job. pretty much what this thing does. It goes from the computer, drawing, to cut path, to steel part, all in what was that, 10 minutes or less?
Which one do you use the most?
Oh, probably the one that's not on there because it's on my grinder. I think they're Jet is what I use. They seem to be really good. Yeah, these are Jet. Let's buy my Lord Go for whatever they cost, but yeah, they seem to last. Like I have definitely used like Walter and other brands, and the Jet ones seem to work a lot better. I think they also have they have a knotted option. You can get like the knotted wire wheel as opposed to just a straight one, which definitely makes a bit of a difference. For most applications, it works better. Without this, my job would take a lot longer. I use that for like cleaning all my components. So like all this mill scale on the back, or not mill scale, slag on the back, all needs to be taken off before I can form it, or even hand it to the customer for that matter. I'll clean all my parts, or try to, before sending them out. If I got time, I try to clean my parts. Definitely if I'm forming parts that need to be cleaned, otherwise the slag will dent my dies, because the slag that comes off, like all this little, if you see that there, all this little stuff that's on the back, that's actually harder than steel. It's a carbon, and it's really hard, and it'll impregnate the dies and dent them. So I got to clean it all off. So the wire wheel does a really good job of that, rather than like a sanding disc or anything else, a grinding disc.
How many wheels do you go through in, I guess, a month?
That probably lasts me a year. The wire wheels don't really wear that quick, so that one will probably last me a year. I do have a few different styles. This one's almost worn down. That one's just a flat one as opposed to a cup one. There's a job I do for a guy. It's like a 4x8 sheet of fish scales. They're like 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, the full sheet, and I wire wheel the whole sheet. This is a makeshift parts tumbler. So, like what I do, it's pretty basic, but like there's one part in here. But I'll just like take 30, or I cut 30 of these, and I just toss them all in there, and then I just hit the go button and just walk away for 10 minutes, and it tumbles all the parts. So like rather than wire wheeling all these small pieces, I just toss them all in there, and they just bounce around and hit each other, and they clean themselves. A bunch of guys are doing that. I was like, oh, that's a good idea. And I needed a concrete mixer to do some concrete in my yard anyways, so I bought it for that, and now I use it for tumbling parts. It's freaking loud. I'll usually turn it on and I'll go in the house. Like I won't stay in here.
Can you hear it in the house too?
I can't hear it in the house, no. I was kind of worried my neighbor would hear it, but he says he doesn't. But no, it's nice to have for like all these for say, all these brackets. I got to form all these, but like all these are all just tumbled. Because for me to stand there and like wire wheel each one would just take hours. But I just tumble them in like 20 minutes and they're all done. Yeah, so that's why that's there. It's kind of in the way most of the time because I don't use it too much, but when I do use it, it sure is handy. This is a Cincinnati press brake. It forms steel. I felt between the plasma cutter, this was my next big purchase as far as building my business. It's definitely done that already. I've only had it running for about a month and a half. It's been sitting here since April. I got it powered. It runs off a 3-phase converter, or a variable frequency drive is what runs this one. So it turns single-phase power into 3-phase power because it's a 10-horse motor that requires 3-phase power, and it's too expensive to bring the actual 3-phase in. So they ran a variable frequency drive to power this thing. It definitely stepped up my game as far as my business and what I'm able to do. Before that, I was basically like anything I needed formed, I'd have to drive to Chilliwack and like, hey, can you bend this for me on these lines? And they either not put it on the lines where they're supposed to go, or it's going to take you 3 weeks before me to get my part back, or whatever else, or they bend it the wrong direction, or who knows what, right? Like, it was always just time to drive to Chilliwack, time to drive back. Sometimes it would take 2 weeks to get my parts back. Sometimes I'd be able to do it same day, luckily. For me to be able to do it here and be able to do it like right now helped out with my own parts that I make, and then also helped me grow my business to becoming more versatile in what I could offer my customers. Definitely worth every penny. You basically just need the room. It's a lot. It takes up a lot of space. It definitely takes a bit of skill to operate. Like it's not just something that anybody can just walk up and operate. So the one I used to run at my day job was a hydraulic press. It had 2 big hydraulic rams. that it ran off of, and it had a numerical controller that you could like kind of set your points, and it was a lot more user friendly. This is a mechanical press from the 70s, and it's definitely old. I'm into this machine for probably 30 grand, all said and done.
You have a dog?
No, well, I do, but she's in the house. I don't know whose dog that is. Anyways, it was a pretty big investment for me. Dragged it out throughout the year. I bought it in April. I didn't power it till the summer, and then it was moving, but I still didn't have the tooling for it. The tooling I bought, I ordered it in September. I didn't get it until end of December. So it definitely took like a full 9 months for me to like get through the process of like getting this thing operational. It's definitely been worth the wait, and it's definitely been worth the money, for sure. So yeah, like I said, like this thing's from the 70s. It's an old mechanical brake. It definitely does the job. It's just not very user friendly. I'd love to get something at least hydraulic that can run more fluently. This thing runs on a cycle, so it has to do a full revolution. It can't just go up and down as I want it to. Just something that can be more controlling, that I can use more CNC functions to control it. Would be nice, rather than this thing, which has no CNC functions. The only thing that I can control is there's an up and down here, which I can control the final height of my bend, which determines what angle I'm bending. It'd be nice to get something newer that's a bit more computer controlled, as opposed to something that's very, very old and very mechanically like basic controlled. Yeah, Miller 251 can do steel and aluminum, MIG welding, 2 different guns. Steel gun, 035 wire, argon CO2 mix, and then your aluminum spoolmatic gun, which is 100% argon. So I got the 2 different bottles, the steel bottle, argon CO2, and then the 100% argon for the aluminum. I've always liked Miller. I've had a few different Miller machines, and I just knew like the 251s were always a good unit to buy. Like you get into the 252s and now the 255s, and they're getting way too electronic. And like my buddy has one. The welder will yell at you if you don't have something plugged in right. And he's like, well, I don't want that. I want this. But it won't let him do what he wants to do because it's smarter than he is, so it thinks. So it doesn't, like, I don't know. Like there's definitely times like with the CNC plasma when you like want technology, and then there's times where, in my opinion, you don't. It's definitely big enough for what I need. I definitely wouldn't go smaller. I had a smaller one, and it was great for when I was starting. When I was in my old house where I didn't have a shop, I just had like an 18 by 20 garage. That was a really good unit, the 211. But now that I have the shop that I have, like this size is perfect. It would be nice to have a second smaller unit that I could like go out in the yard with an extension cord and like weld something out in the yard. Like I've had to fix my gate a few times or whatever. So like rather than dragging this thing out through the gravel, it'd be nice to have like a little suitcase unit, but this thing has been great. I definitely wouldn't have any desire to ever buy anything else unless this thing straight up like fried. But when I bought it broken, and I put a brand new circuit board in it. I don't foresee this thing like kicking the bucket at all. I definitely would recommend a Miller to anybody. That's just me, the Makita guy. Yeah, that's just where I put all my parts for forming. It's a lot lighter duty than my fab table. It doesn't need to be structural at all. It just needs to hold things until I can pick them up and put them in the press. Or if I'm laying out lines or writing notes or whatever, yeah, it's just a light duty table. Pretty basic, pretty simple. Oh yeah, that headache. It used to leak. Loading 5x10s of steel sheet, you need a forklift. You can't do it by hand. Like the main sheet I cut is 3/16. 5x10s of 3/16 weigh like 450 pounds per sheet. So, and I usually have 10 on hand. So to move a sheet, you can't do it by yourself. You gotta use a forklift. I started out with a free forklift that my buddy's dad gave me. It was a little electric thing that like I was bigger than the forklift, but it would lift 1,000 pounds. And he gave it to me for free. And I found a charger for it, and it lasted like 9 months. And then the battery pack on it or something went and it wouldn't move anymore. So then I bought this thing, and it was leaking and the brakes didn't work and a bunch of other stuff. And then we got that fixed. I had a good buddy of mine who's a heavy duty mechanic who's not Cam. He fixed it. Somebody better than Cam. Better looking, all around, just better guy. He came and he fixed it, and then yeah, it's been a good unit ever since. Definitely a good thing to have a forklift. A lot of other guys use they'll use like an engine hoist, and they'll like make like a plate clamping jig on their engine hoist to like move plates around, or they'll use like tables that like go up and down. They'll slide the plate onto the table, and then they'll like roll the table over. Like there's all sorts of ways to do it. Or gantry cranes are a good way to do it too, but a lot of guys have some pretty shady ways, or not shady, I guess, just like sketchy ways of like moving plate onto their table. It's just like, just get a forklift. You know? Do it right. This is all mild steel, the first 4 levels of the rack. Anywhere, the bottom is quarter inch and 3/8 steel. And then from there it's 3/16. And then the next level up is 10 gauge. And then from there is all the last tier is all the thinner stuff, like 12, 14, and 16 gauge, because I don't really cut this really that much. I mostly cut 3/16, which is this guy. I actually have a bunch of more of those sheets down here, just because I don't trust the rack to carry that much weight if I'm stacking 10 sheets on one set of racking. So mostly I cut the 3/16 for most bumper applications, unless it's like a really light duty truck, like maybe like a little tracker. Probably build the truck or build the bumper at a 10 gauge. Quarter inch, guys usually use quarter inch for the mounts on the bumper. So they'll build the mounts out of quarter inch, and then they'll build the rest of the bumper out of 3/16. And then 10 gauge is used a lot for like other stuff. Like I use the 10 gauge for tent racks and other gussets and other things, molly panels, all sorts of brackets and whatever else. All my ditch light brackets are all made out of 10 gauge. So yeah, that's mostly what I stock. And then the top 2 levels are aluminum, 5x10s of aluminum. And those I don't cut too much of, so I don't carry a ton of it, but it's nice to have when all of a sudden a guy needs a bunch of aluminum cut, and then you just have it on hand. So I always try and keep material on hand, so that if a guy needs something, I'm like, oh yeah, let me order that for you, and then wait a week, and then I'll cut it for you. Like, oh, you need that? Okay, I'll cut it this afternoon, kind of thing, or I'll cut it tomorrow morning, and not have to wait for like a supplier to bring me one sheet of material for a job. I'd rather just, when I do an order, I just try and like keep things in stock. So, and I stock more material outside as well. That doesn't really need to be so clean. Like anything 1/2 inch and up, I'll leave outside. There's a lot of aluminum that I'll leave outside too, because it doesn't rust. So it doesn't matter if it's in the weather too much. And then I have a couple sheets of stainless out there too that aren't a number 2 finish or a number 4 finish. I can't remember which one. So it doesn't matter if they're wet either. So they just stay outside. But yeah, that's my steel rack. That's where the money goes. Yeah, steel prices have gone up like significantly in the last 2 years. It's a bit ridiculous, but I mean, it takes money to make money, right? Like you gotta spend it. I can't buy one sheet of steel every time somebody wants to order something. I just have to have it. It's a little bit different than, like, for instance, my dad, who's a contractor. Oh, he need to build a wall. Okay, I'll go buy 2x4s. I can't do that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work the same. This is the bandsaw. It's a small bandsaw. It's Cam's bandsaw. Yeah, it's just a bandsaw that it was actually originally mine, and then I sold it to him when I moved, and then I just asked to borrow it for a job I was doing. So I grabbed it, and I was actually cutting a piece of a die for a job that I got to bend. So yeah, it's just a bandsaw. Cuts metal. Something that the plasma cutter can't do, like if I got to cut square tubing, or I got to cut pipe or round tube or angle, the plasma cutter can't do that. It cuts plate only. If I'm building a frame or something, then to cut square tube to length to make whatever frame I want to build or whatever like that, then that's kind of where that tool comes in. If you're cutting aluminum tube, you can also use a chop saw, like a wood chop saw, to cut aluminum, which I actually have on my back rack as well for cutting aluminum, which I don't do too often, but it's just handy to have rather than borrowing one. I bought my own chop saw for that. Yeah, I don't drink. Too expensive. I have a deer in there though. This is my hunting season. Bunch of deer burger and deer sausage. That was October this last year. went out for a weekend and got 2. I got 1 and my buddy got 1. It's a good season, good weekend anyways. One thing I could show you guys, it's kind of hidden in the corner. This is that phase or the variable frequency drive that runs the press. So I got to turn it on. So that will just sit and run, and that's what converts single phase to 3-phase power. While the breaker's 90 amps, I think there's only 60 going to it. That'll just sit there and idle. Once I turn the press on, then it'll start ramping up. So it'll actually start at 0 hertz, and it'll slowly ramp the motor up to 60 hertz. So if the first time we fired it, we just left it at full power, and I turned it on, the whole shop went dim, because it was trying to draw the whole 60 hertz on this 10-horse motor, and it was like, because there's resistance on that flywheel spinning, right? So the first time the whole shop goes dim, and we're like, oh. So then he changed it to be a ramp-up start. So then I turn it on, and the motor will slowly spin, and it'll start to speed up. It takes about 2 minutes for that process to go. But yeah. My fab table, this is pretty critical for everything. Like, if you're doing anything beyond just plasma cutting, like what I do over there, like if you're to build anything, like to have a flat, smooth surface is pretty ideal. So this is I built this table, 2x2 square tube, and then I put a 1/2-inch thick steel plate on top of it. And the plate was actually bowed. We had to clamp it and pull it down to get it to be flat. But yeah, like I build any project. I can tack parts to it to hold them, or I built jigs. I've tacked jigs onto there to build stanchions or whatever else, railings. I did a railing last week. I did tack all these pieces, all these little vertical pieces, so that all the railings, I could sit all the railings in place like a jig. So it was just like, made things so much better. And just have I've seen guys have small tables and it just doesn't, like, you can't build much on it. So even a 4x8, I'd love to have a bigger table, but the prices of steel is just a bit ridiculous to justify a bigger table. This is where I do all my like fabrication and building, if it's not actually on a vehicle or on a job. Toolbox, sockets. This is like back when I was like doing engine work. Like I used to be an engine machinist when I got out of high school. My first job, I worked at a shop tearing apart, building engines, doing flywheel jobs, grinding flywheels, grinding brake rotors, valve jobs, all sorts of stuff. So we got the toolbox, and I just started filling it with like automotive tools, which I don't really use too much anymore, but they come in handy. Punches and pliers and more pliers, and like these are more like specific tools, like easy out bits, really tiny screwdrivers, kind of more like specialty stuff, and then just like a random drawer full of screwdrivers. Wrenches, a bunch of missing ones. Then kind of like my socket, not my sockets are up here, but like all my ratchets and more specialty sockets, like my snap-on Allen key sockets and my torque sockets and my axle nut sockets, kind of the bigger stuff, torque wrenches. And then just a big drawer full of hammers and bigger tools that don't fit in other drawers because nowhere else do they fit. This is kind of, yeah, just a random parts drawer, like kind of like a junk drawer for this one. A bunch of things that I purchased that I've never used or whatever. Another junk drawer that's kind of a bit more organized. Some tools in it. Tap and dies, a few tap and dies that are common on Toyotas. Torque spec book for all your torque specs on any engine. Sticker drawer. Very important. Bigger wrenches, big torque wrench, more stickers. Random drawers for the rest of this, like random things. Yeah, bunch of different tape, bunch of Sharpies, all sorts of crap. Again, more just random crap down here where I don't know where anything else is gonna go, so it goes in there. Yeah, the bottom is just kind of like all junk drawer stuff, but like the top is all tools. The air horn? It's a cheap $20 Amazon air horn. I don't know. I was gonna put it on my truck, but it just hasn't got there yet. I've been too busy. So yeah, that's all that was for. So yeah, I have this box, and then this is my brother-in-law's box that he stores here. I use whatever I want. And then yeah, just random storage, a bunch of random bolts, and then some bolts over here are just ones that I use commonly, mostly stainless bolts, and then just all sorts of just hardware and stuff that I use for different projects that I repeat, or like other like tent rack builds or roof racks or whatever I know I'm going to be needing more of. I just try and keep them on hand. So I wrecked that rim on my old truck. It came off because it wasn't torqued down far enough. Or it wasn't torqued down tight enough, I should say. It actually came off my truck as I was driving.
On the highway?
No, it was on the highway. It was in front of my parents' place because I was driving there because I could feel something was wrong with the truck. So I was driving to my dad's place to go drop off my truck and then drive home in our other vehicle. And then as I turned the corner, the wheel all of a sudden came off the truck. Luckily, I was doing like 20, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, the rim can't be bolted on a vehicle. So I was like, oh, I'll use it as a hose reel for my plasma cutter.
Your little reminder.
Yeah.
Always torque.
Always torque. Yeah. Or torque more. This thing I was on all day yesterday, the drill press. I was drilling out a bunch of screens for a mattress recycler, actually. And I got 3 more to do. He picked one up this morning. He needed it. One of the screens had a hole right through it. It had worn right out. So I drilled one out for him, and then I got 3 more to do. But yeah, I was on that for like 6 hours yesterday drilling out holes. That was horrible. Basically, if I plasma cut something and I forget a hole, I'd sooner just re-plasma cut it than to try and drill the hole out. So, but it is handy to have here and there, like for random things. I've definitely used it. One thing I do use it for, on all the bumpers I build, I plasma cut these lugs out of 3/4 plate, and I plasma cut them without a hole in it, just because the hole gets deformed when you plasma cut it. It just can't, like plasma cutting a 1-inch hole through a 3/4 plate, it just doesn't turn out very nice. So I'd sooner just like plasma cut it blank and then drill the hole out, and it just turns out way nicer. So yeah, it's been really good for that, and really good for this other job that I'm currently doing. But I don't actually use the drill press too much. This thing? Yeah. It's a 2010 hydraulic press that I bought a while ago just to push out bushings or bearings. Then I started using it for dimple dyeing plates. And I kind of don't use it anymore because I got the big press. So it just kind of sits there now. Because it's only 20 ton and my other one's 135 ton. It just kind of hangs out. Oh, all my Makita drills? Well, they match really well with my Milwaukee jacket. So that's why I have them.
Which one's your favorite on the wall there?
None of those. Probably this one. This one's my favorite, the Impact. That one I use mostly. I usually have sockets on it, which I probably shouldn't do, but whatever. The drills I don't really use too much, just because I'm not hand drilling most things. If anything, I'm using the drill press, or I'm plasma cutting the hole, because I did it right the first time. Cam gave me this tool chest a long time ago.
He gave you something?
Yeah, he did, right? You would never thought.
Does it work?
No, it doesn't work. It's broken. That's probably why he gave it to me. Yeah, no, Cam actually gave me this tool chest a couple years ago, and it just has some electrical stuff in it. What is that? A helicoil kit in it. Just, yeah, mostly electrical. That's my air tank for my air compressor. Shops need air. Any shop, anywhere, needs an air compressor and needs air in their shop. Like, there's no way around it. Yeah, so my compressor is actually up behind that wall on my mezzanine, and then it feeds and fills the tank here. I think there's about 175 PSI in that tank. For the plasma cutting, for how much plasma cutting I do and the volume that the plasma cutter takes, I need a high volume of tank. Otherwise if I run too low, then the plasma cutter will sense that I've gone too low on my compressed air, and then it'll shut off. My compressor and the tank needs to have a sufficient volume in order to keep up with that. And actually my press brake takes air as well. So it needs air to operate as well. So yeah. And then just any air tool, like your Dremels or anything. I got a scaler that uses a lot of air, or just blowing air, cleaning up areas, impact gun, any of that stuff, just everything needs air. That tank, it was actually a full unit. The compressor and the motor was on top of that tank. And then when it was sitting up there bolted to the wall, it used to shake that wall, and then it would actually shake the neighbor's house. But he never told me. So I took the motor and the compressor off of there, and I put that one up in the mezzanine, and then that one actually caught fire a few months ago. So I scrapped that one. I bought a brand new compressor and a new motor, and then I just kept the tank. Don't buy a cheap compressor. I mean, you can buy cheap compressor. That one was off Craigslist for a few $100, and it ran good for 2 years. Like it did nothing but supply air and help me do my job. So there's nothing wrong with that, but like they're gonna go. The thing was already old when I bought it, so getting a good compressor is definitely key. It's something that's overlooked, I think, a lot, but it's definitely key to your operation.
How is all the air plumbed?
3/4 Sked 40 steel pipe. Didn't take too long. My brother-in-law is a gas fitter, so he has a threader tool, and we just kind of whipped the whole thing out pretty quick. I did this half myself in a weekend, and then once we decided that we wanted more air, then I tapped into that T there, and me and him ran it across over the garage door, over to the press, and then down to the other side in an afternoon. So it doesn't take too long to do. There's guys definitely say there's better ways to do it rather than steel pipe. A lot of guys use like the water PEX line that you use in a house, which works, but they say that stuff breaks down with UV rays, and plasma cutting and welding is UV rays. Not that like the light is right beside the hose, so it probably would be fine. But if you're comparing like a plastic line at 150 psi or like a steel line, like you're gonna never have a problem with a steel line. The only thing you might have an issue with is like if there's rust in the lines, you might get a bit of rust in your air, but I have enough filters and anything that's gonna trap that before it gets to the components that I'm using. So I have dry air and clean air by the time it gets to the nozzle or whatever I'm using. So I'm not worried about that. Freaking thing has doubled my power consumption. Oh yeah, it sucks. Not that it like idling doesn't suck the power. When I turn that thing on, it like, oh yeah, it sucks.
What, Cam?
Cam sucks? Yeah. Again, my name's Josh. This is my shop, JR Customs, CNC Cutting and Fabrication. I do fabrication, steel fabrication, aluminum fabrication. Hope you enjoyed the shop tour. Yeah, no, comment down below if you want to see more of my shop, or I'm sure other people's shops or businesses, and see what the trades have to offer.